have a... Hi Ben, good morning.
Morning, Tony.
It is such an honor to have you in our Tony Tan Show and podcast this morning. Thank you for joining us.
No, it's an honor to be here. Thank you, Tony. Great.
Yes, Ben, I know that you are from Okta, one of the most innovative cloud security companies in the world today, and also a market leader in Gartner itself. Could you just share a little bit with us of what's the key capabilities of Okta? What do they do for a living?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Okta is a cloud-based identity provider. So in the physical world, we have identity and we need to prove who we are, whether that's a driver's license or a passport, to make sure that the right people can do the right things and we know who is who, and more importantly, who's not who. In the digital world, we need the same sort of thing. So we need to be very sure people can prove who they are, and we can also keep people that are pretending to be someone else, away from key assets. And in a post-pandemic world, this is obviously more important than ever as people are working remotely, not on-premise in offices anymore.
Wow, I think this is really important. I think this is what is probably like the first line of defense to ensure that no one access your assets without your knowledge, especially when you're working from home, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So we talk about enabling the right people to get access to the right technology, at the right time.
So Ben, I understand that you are a Chief Information Security Officer with Okta. What is your role like in Okta on a daily basis?
Sure. So I'm a Chief Security Officer. Absolutely. I'm for the Asia Pacific region. So we have regional Chief Security Officers and then a global Chief Security Officer as well. But my remit is regional, and I really split my time. I split my KPIs between internal security and security of our people and our assets, our data. And then externally facing, so looking after our customers and how we secure them, and for some of our products, how we secure them and their customers. So we talk about their workforce identity, but also their customers' identity.
Wow, so you are really right thick in the action of cybersecurity.
Oh, it's a beautiful place to be. I love what I do and I love helping others, and being, working for an iconic vendor like this lets me not only help customers of my company and staff in my company, but organizations around the world, be them corporates or not-for-profits, and everybody that interfaces with them.
And that is why I'm so excited to have you with us today. I mean, there's so many pressing questions that is happening now, accelerating now, due to recent trends that we really need to hear from you and give us some guidance, especially to our audience who's listening in today. I have heard from people that say there's two pandemics going on. One is the COVID-19 pandemic, and the other one is the cybersecurity pandemic that's been happening, right? And we have been seeing a lot of this in recent times. Can you just maybe share with us why do you think there is such a big growth on cybercrimes in the recent months that is so tied to this COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, that's a massive question. When I joined cybersecurity years ago now, it was often likened to a virus. A computer virus is quite like a biological virus. It's something that distributes itself and grows, and once it's out in the wild, samples of it can be used and tailored and retransmitted. The pandemic, in terms of the COVID we've seen around the world, has been changing for everybody, changing for citizens, changing for corporates, changing for workforces. We've obviously had the move to remote work, an acceleration of cloud-based operations in terms of workloads and storage that organizations are using. Pushing workforces remote and pushing consumers remote have changed workforces' behaviours, has changed consumers' behaviours as well in terms of who they buy from and how. And for many organisations, unless they were already working in this way, they've really had to adopt a mindset of move first and plan later. They've essentially had to punch holes in their security fabric in the name of business continuity just to keep the lights on, to keep their staff operational, to keep their customers being serviced. So at this time, it's almost a perfect confluence for cybercrime to take off as well. We've got organisations moving rapidly, still security conscious, but having to compromise security to keep running. We've got consumers and staff working from home, maybe homeschooling, working in different ways, using Zoom so much, not having a help desk at their side, not having peers at their side they can ask questions to. And criminals adapting very, very fast. Criminals are very agile, so they can tailor their attacks to make it relevant to COVID-19. They can tailor their attacks to make it relevant to a track and trace program. And it's really been an absolute gold rush for them in terms of how they can attack, how they can manipulate, how they can destabilize or spread misinformation or make money or whatever it is they want to do. So it's a pretty bleak landscape at the moment.
Yeah, and I would like to share with you, also ask your opinion about this recent spike of ransomware attacks. We have seen, of course, the Colonial Pipeline in the US, we have seen JBS, meat packers, and there's just so many ransomware attacks. The statistics are alarming, right? Why do you think there's this growth of ransomware? It's not an old threat, but it's growing so rapidly right now among the different type of cybersecurity attacks. Could you share some lights onto these ransomware attacks?
Yeah, look, I'll give you my point of view, and firstly, it's just that it's a brilliant way to make money. And I'll come to that in a moment. But as you said, we've had a spate of ransomware, some of them very well publicised, some of them against smaller organisations and not as well publicised. Obviously, the Colonial Pipeline attack was a ransomware on a billing system at the pipeline, but that shut down oil distribution across the eastern half of USA, and that had a real impact out of the cyberspace to a physical population who can then put pressure on a government. The meat packers, as you said, and then more recently the Kaseya ransomware, where Kaseya is a firm who creates security software to monitor and patch. They provide that software to manage service providers who provide security services to other organisations. And a bit like SolarWinds at the tail end of last year, which was a supply chain compromise, where by compromising a supplier you could then compromise many, many customers. With Kaseya, they used the same thing, but it's a ransomware supply chain attack, so to speak. So compromising the supplier to get to their customers, or really the MSPs who are using the software to get to their customers, and then ransomware the lot. A great business model for criminals, very, very successful in terms of its reach. And then if we get to how they make money doing this, if you're a criminal, your mission is to go and make money. Traditionally, ransomware was encrypting the systems and then offering the decryption key for a ransom. A possible defense against this was to have good backups and good restoration procedures to, instead of paying a ransom, just restore backups. Increasingly now we see criminals also stealing data. So even if you don't pay the ransom and you can restore backups, you're still at risk of a very public data breach as criminals sell that data or just dump it and make it available on the internet. At the same time, we have criminals gaining access to organisations and then on-selling that access via access brokers to other criminals who might have a completely different motivation to attack an organisation. And then sometimes, which I find absolutely fascinating, criminals are also able to sell the knowledge that a company's been attacked or ransomed or encrypted to financial brokers, to short sell a stock before it becomes public knowledge. So there's just such a plethora of ways criminals can monetize this sort of attack. It's obviously working, and that's why we're seeing such a ransomware pandemic, so to speak, as well.
Ben, just now you said something that I was really, really, very interested in, right? You say that the payment of ransom for ransomware attacks. And we have seen Colonial Pipeline, we have seen JBS, they're paying huge amount of money to unlock their systems. Now, there is this two sides of a coin. Some people will say, let's pay it. Some people say, don't pay it, right? When you pay it, chances are that you might not get the data back, or they might attack you even more because now you are paying customers and it's publicized. If you don't pay it, you might not get your data, but then you are sending a strong message to the cyber criminals. What are your thoughts about, should we pay for ransomware or should we not pay for ransomware?
Oh, that's a horrible question. Thankfully, I've never been in the position to have to make this decision. I think it's very, very easy when your systems are not encrypted to say that we shouldn't pay. Every time we pay, we are adding millions, tens of millions of dollars into this criminal economy so that they can improve their tooling, they can hire more staff. If that's what they need to do. Every time we pay, we are perpetuating the problem. But I think if you're an executive in an organisation, maybe let's say you're a large hospital, having your systems encrypted is not acceptable, not sustainable. And if you can't recover quickly, you're going to have to make that payment. There's been lots of discussion and debate within industry, lots of discussion and debate within governments about outlawing these payments. We need to get there, but it needs to be safe and sustainable. There's organisations that just can't They can't sustain this. So I haven't got a solid answer there. I think it's a really tough question. What we are seeing is law enforcement moving on the criminals themselves where they can, and they could be harboured by another nation so that we can't prosecute them directly. Traditionally, we've seen political ramifications when an attack is attributed to attackers in another country, which almost punishes a whole community, a whole country. With trade embargoes or that sort of thing, where governments or law enforcement can instead attack the crypto wallets that the criminals are using, or find other ways to take down their service or attack the criminals directly, make it personal for them. I think we'll have much better outcomes for everybody.
Ben, you point out a very, very important point, right? Whether we pay or we do not pay depends on how severe is the attack and whether his life is at stake. Can you imagine if a hospital system is locked down in this pandemic? I think we have no choice but to pay, right? Because you cannot wait for the system to be unlocked. You cannot wait for the arm of the law to come into play when every second counts and comes to saving lives. Yeah. So I don't think you have rightly said correctly. It's not a answer that you can just provide like that. It's very dependent on the particular case. And what we have seen also very interesting. We used to think that ransomware will hit the more digital of the organizations. The more digital you are, the higher chance that you'll be hit by a attack like that. But you look at the case of JPS Packers. I mean, come on, these guys are not really, they are not the most digital organizations, and the impact to that is immense, right? I understand from the news that they have went back to Stone Age. They use paper, they use pen, they shut down all their computer systems. They just went offline. They went dark totally. So, could you comment on that? How do ransomware attacks? Do they look at digital companies, or do they just spam the entire internet and see who are the ones that is vulnerable, and then they just attack them?
Look, I think there's such a wide variety of attackers out there. It's interesting thinking about digital companies and those that aren't digital. So we've seen meat packers, we've seen factories, hospitals, areas with a digital presence, but they're not traditionally a digital business, had to often become more digital in the pandemic we're in. Obviously, some places, again, hospitals is a great example where they can't send their staff to work remote. They need to be on site. But if those organisations aren't traditionally digital, and they might not have the staff available to make their security a priority, or it hasn't been a priority, it's not where they invest because they've got more important things to do, rightly so. I think attackers will find an easier time getting in there. So there will still be internet-facing assets. They might not be as secured as a digital native company or as a large bank who has a very large budget to secure their assets online. And as to whether ransomware gangs would target them in particular, I don't know. I think there's a lot of opportunistic fire and forget type internet weapons there, so to speak, to use a dramatic term, yes, where a hospital may get compromised. I would like to think there's not criminals out there during a pandemic seeking to compromise a hospital. It could just be bad luck that an email went their way because it was forwarded to a large set of emails which was pulled off a database somewhere. But then you could have the opposite side of the coin, where there's people perhaps trying to steal knowledge or IP or information, who could be targeting pharmaceutical companies, for example, looking for vaccine data, or could be targeting, again, a different firm. The oil pipeline's an interesting one as well, where you can target elements and have a much larger impact on society. It was similar when I was in Europe and looking at what appeared to me to be destabilisation of the EU by foreign powers. There's so many different use cases of how digital attacks can occur.
Yes, I think that what you have mentioned is so to the point. I mean, there are general attacks and there are specific attacks, right? So that's why we always say that it's not a matter of when are you going to attack. It's a matter of it's not a matter of will you be attacked. It's a question of when will you be attacked, right? Because everybody's just trying to attack everybody. It's just a matter of time before you just your chance comes around. I guess that's what you're saying.
I've heard it described as there's three sorts of people in security: those who have been attacked, those who I think are undergoing attack now, or are about to be attacked, or waiting to be attacked, and then those who have been attacked and don't know it yet. So it's going to
Yes,
happen either way.
exactly.
And that the security has evolved in the last decade or so, or longer, from building higher walls, building higher defences, building more layered defences, trying to keep attackers out, to assuming compromise, assuming attackers will get in. We won't stop them, but being able to monitor and limit that damage so that we can detect it and respond earlier. And that's really what the future looks like here.
Yeah, and I would like to ask this question as well. I mean, the last couple of years, big enterprises have been sinking millions of dollars into cybersecurity solutions. Why are they still being compromised? Why are they still making headlines today, in the newspaper? Are we winning this fight, in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm an eternal optimist, so I firmly believe we can win this fight. There certainly are large and increasing budgets and large and increasing investments being made here, but I liken it to an organisation has risk, has exposure, and that's almost unlimited. There are almost limitless risks facing an organisation, and they evolve daily and weekly. And yet an organisation has limited funds to invest and limited resources to throw at a problem, and often it could be that they're getting the cybersecurity trained resources is harder than actually getting the dollars to make something change. So it becomes a question of, are we appropriately investing our limited resource to the almost limitless problem we have? So that becomes about understanding your own business, your organisation, your crown jewels, so to speak, your key assets, your people, your supply chain, and building that robust view of risk so that you can really prioritise what are the biggest problems you should be investing dollars in. Now, if that wasn't a big enough problem in itself, we've, over the last 18 months, had a pandemic that has completely changed the landscape, and criminals have adapted, and adapted very rapidly to a post-pandemic world, where organisations, I think, have multi-year programs and transformations and digital transformations or security transformations in place where they are not able to evolve as rapidly. So there might be investments going on which aren't bad investments at all, but aren't exactly tailored to the problem we're facing today.
Yeah, for example, like cloud security is one of them, right?
Cloud security.
How do they look at
and I'm thinking
hybrid security?
Yep. Hybrid security, remote workers or workers who are working in a hybrid sense. People working on multiple devices, home devices versus work devices versus mobile devices. And then the absolutely rampant increase in social engineering against staff, and phishing or voice phishing or SMS phishing. All these attacks staff are being bombarded with. And it's funny, I only relocated from the United Kingdom to Australia last March. Within a week or so of getting a new phone and a new phone number, I was getting SMS phishers telling me my internet was broken when I hadn't even configured internet, or the tax office was chasing me for debts when I hadn't even spoken to the tax office in years. Maybe that's why they were chasing me. But it's just absolutely rampant. And again, it's this fire and forget mentality, which is bombarding staff, trying to solicit credentials from them. And if investments aren't tailored to those threats we're seeing, I think they could be spent better elsewhere. But again, it's an easy thing to say when there could be multi-year programs to uplift security, and security is such a wide area with so many steps in an attack chain that we need to secure if we're going to do this properly.
Yeah. And what we are just mentioning just now, whether how we prioritize our security spending, how much budget that we need to put in, looking at where the company is going. This plan has to be look at it holistically in terms of planning how to counter security threats, not just in the present but also in the future. But what we are talking so far is mostly about commercial cybercrimes, the criminal organizations out there. But increasingly in the last few years, I did a profile for nation-sponsored attacks is really getting a lot of attention, And they're not just talking about nations versus nations, it's also nation versus enterprises. How serious are these nation-sponsored attacks in your opinion, Ben?
Well, let me begin with just incredibly difficult to defend against. But I'll start with just a quick caveat or definition here. I see this as there's state-sponsored attacks, and then there's state-endorsed or state-allowed entities who might not be sponsored and have all the resources to hand that a state-sponsored attacker would have, but are allowed to operate free of law enforcement in the country they're in. And I think they're very different things. I've seen recent discussions likening this conversation to pirates versus privateers in sort of colonial times, where pirates
Yes.
prey on merchants, and they're criminals. Any way you look at it, they're criminals. If they're caught, they'll be prosecuted and probably executed. Whereas privateers are criminals to some nations who they're preying on, but to others they could be heroes. They could be considered part of the military, or at least an extension of the military. And they're certainly not prosecuted. In fact, they're given every free harbour they can get to operate from, to work for that nation. So there's different categories of attackers here. But if I think about state-sponsored in particular, they're incredibly dangerous. So they've got capabilities of a very powerful caliber. They've got lots of resources, and probably resources in excess of all but the largest organisations. I often come back to what's the motivation for a criminal or for a state-sponsored attacker, or for anybody to attack your organisation. A criminal's fairly easy. It's probably going to be money they're after, or information that they can monetize. With a state-sponsored attack, it could be something different. It could be money, but that's much less likely, because they're probably very well funded. It could be information. It could be to sow confusion. It could be to sow distrust and misinformation or disinformation. There's just so many things a state-sponsored attacker could try to do, depending on what their motivation is, and that can be really hard to understand. But if I bring this back to an organisation, which of those motivations makes sense for a state-sponsored attacker to attack you? It could be for many organisations it's not a top-level risk for them. But if someone is working for an organisation where that is a real risk, I think it's important not to try to solve this problem yourself. If you think you're a target of a state-sponsored attacker, our own governments have our own agencies which we can communicate with and talk to and get assistance from in the event of managing risk, or in the event of an actual attack.
Okay, so that what you are talking about, I think, in terms of state-sponsored attack, I think that I like the analogy between privateers and pirates. It is such a apt analogy, right? And some of these privateers are sponsored by nations in the past, right? They are given a cert, they are given a right to go out there and do what they need to do, right? And I think this is a lot of parallels of what we are seeing in this modern day scene of cyber attacks as well. Now, and if you look at just nation sponsored attacks, you look at cybercrimes, and if this is not just enough, we also have the sorry, my tongue is just a little bit tight this morning. Proliferation of IoT devices, right? The Internet of Things, everything is smart devices right now. And there's such a huge growth out there across organizations, in our homes as well. How is this adding up to the complexity for us to secure our homes and our companies against this new wave of smart devices that's coming into play?
Yeah, it's if we haven't spoken about enough bleak risk already, let's add IoT to that fire.
Yes.
As you say, they're becoming completely ubiquitous. Every home, every office, every factory, everywhere we look, we're seeing IoT. We're seeing this huge growth in them, massive volume, entire networks of IoT. The issue here for me is that they're often sold and then plugged in and used without thought to security. And I think it's a different discussion whether or not they're designed with security in mind to begin with, because I think some are and some less so. But if they're taken off the shelf and then plugged into a network or put online, the passwords that are default might be well known and publicized, probably won't be as secure. And then over time, as with any technology, vulnerabilities will be discovered and will be leveraged, will be leveraged to attack. So best practice would be to change that password and keep the device up to date and patched. Sometimes that may not even be an option in the configuration. So we've got issues there. If I bring this again back to motivation, attackers could have many motivations to attack an IoT device. It could be a weak entry point into a network, lets you then move on with your ransomware or data theft or whatever it is an attacker wants to do. We see a lot of attackers creating botnets, so large connected networks of devices that then can be used to do something else. It could be used for denial of service, where we could knock businesses offline, we could knock governments offline, we could shut down websites for a period of time, or it could be used to set up crypto mining. where we're just using someone else's resources to
Yes.
mine cryptocurrency to, again, make money. It so often comes back to money. Or it could be, and I've seen instances of boardroom cameras being hacked or boardroom microphones being hacked so that criminals can listen in on executive conversations, whether that's spying on M&A discussions or just learning market announcements before they're made to trade on the stock market. And there's so many ways we can use and abuse technology to try and make money. And then we have browsers like Showdown, I don't know if you've come across, but which you can use to search for these devices, some of which may be well secured, some of which may be completely unsecured. So it's not a difficult thing to attack. They're wide open, and as you say, it's a growing market. We're going to see more of this in future. So often I think this comes back to government policy or government mandated controls in terms of manufacturing and secure design. And again, when we look at devices and where they're manufactured, different governments have different points of view on how that should be. So it's one of the many issues we're facing at the moment.
Yes, and I agree. There's a massive issue actually, especially where you see driverless autonomous vehicles coming to play, drones coming to play.
Absolutely.
I mean, the issues going to multiply, right?
Yeah.
And talking about government ban, you know that every country right now, especially in Asia, we have a big emphasis, Singapore included, to become a smart nation. We want to use autonomous technologies. We want to use smart devices and stuff like that. So we already mentioned about the risk on IoT devices previously, right? Do you have any advice for governments who are on the path of smart nations that are looking to up their innovation, up their digital access to the citizens? What are some of the things that you look out for from a cybersecurity perspective when they embark on this smart nations journey?
Well, absolutely love the idea of smart cities, of self-healing cities or self-maintaining cities. There's so much that can be done here to make humans' lives better, and that's really what technology is all about for me. I saw some recent or perhaps not recent anyway, I saw some articles, I saw them recently, about Leeds in the United Kingdom building robots which were autonomously repairing potholes in streets or repairing streetlights along streets, which I just think is fantastic. Let's free up humans to do more value add work than that. Likewise, where I am in Sydney, I know on the Sydney Harbour Bridge there's 2 robots that have been there for some time, which do nothing but crawl back and forth looking for structural weakness or things to clean, and either repairing and maintaining that themselves or flagging them to be looked at by humans. But every time we add devices, every time we make something smarter, in air quotes, we're increasing our attack surface. We're making more devices, more networks or wider parts of a network available to be probed and looked at and potentially vulnerable to be attacked by someone externally. So if governments are going to go down this path, then it makes sense to. It just needs to be done with security in mind at the beginning, in that design phase, rather than security in mind as an afterthought. If it's designed with security in mind at the beginning, then we can make it secure, and there's a much lower cost involved in doing that than trying to fix it up after the fact. And then when you talk about things like drones or autonomous cars, I've mentioned hospitals already. Technology is one thing, big banks are one thing, and international markets are one thing. But when we talk about real people's lives, that's not something we really want to compromise on. So getting it right first time is very, very important.
So I hear you, Ben. What we need to do is just to design all this digital process with security in mind as we roll out these services, rather than as an afterthought, right? Build all these security protocols right at the beginning, even before we roll out any type of services. To be totally security minded would be a good way to help us to reduce the attack surfaces and the chances of compromise moving forward.
Yep.
Now, talking about nation states, talking about government, cybercrimes is also known as the weaponization of codes, right? How do you foresee the future, war being break out? How do you see cyber attacks play a role in the future of conflicts and warfare between nations?
Yeah, look, good question. I think cyber warfare is something that clearly already exists. I think cyber warfare is probably already going on in a significant scale between nations, and I think some norms exist which keep this behind the scenes. When people overstep boundaries, I think we hear about it more. We might hear some attribution from one government towards another, maybe some reciprocal actions. But as technology changes, we've talked about IoT, we've talked about smart devices, we've talked about autonomous cars, autonomous drones. We will see more of this, and it doesn't take long to look through science fiction to find things that are becoming more and more real. So I go back to the Boston Robotics videos that have been well publicised for a long time now. Some of the new science fiction movies, particularly about warfare, paint a bleak picture. I've been following news stories about autonomous military drones, and I think what I was reading about was Turkish drones operating in Libya, operating without human intervention whilst attacking human adversaries. It's a fascinating area, and it's a horrifying area, but it's not something we're going to see go away. It's something we're going to see more and more. So the security of those assets, where they're digital and where they are weaponized, is more and more important. And in a sense, it reflects but leads the conversation we're having in terms of private citizens or in terms of organizations. The boundaries have gone. How we secure assets in a world without that perimeter around an organization becomes the question, and that's how we get onto zero trust networking and zero trust architectures, and I bring it back to leading. There's many ways you can do that, and many pieces you can bite off. I bring it down to identity at the beginning, and securing who gets access to what, to when, why, and tracking that and making that very, very secure.
Would you agree that before even the first shot is fired, the first drone is launched, the first robots start to move across the battlefield, would you say that cybersecurity or the codes will go in first to disrupt communications and cause massive disruptions before even the first shot is fired?
I think so, absolutely. And again, looking at recent history in Eastern Europe, I think we've seen attacks on critical national infrastructure, attacks on, it could be power grids, it could be water supply. Much easier to, in a future war, invade a country if their internet's down, if their electricity grid's down, if an entire population is destabilised by not having clean drinking water. The military is probably going to be busy trying to help the population instead of thinking about how to defend a country. So, it's a bleak future I envisage, but I hope that's never the case. But I think it makes sense. If I was a military-minded man, you would use weapons available at your disposal, wouldn't you?
Yep. So what you're saying is that cybersecurity is not just about for-profit. Cybersecurity is about survival. It's about lives at the end of the day. So taking care of your cybersecurity posture is absolutely critical today. Something that you cannot, it's not an afterthought. It must be something that's right forefront of anything that we do in either at home or when we go to work or from a nation perspective, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is the world we live in, and we need to do it securely.
Yes. And I hate to say this, but I know that I'm throwing so many difficult questions at you. And not that now that with IoT and everything that's coming your way, I know that you're thinking of how to answer those questions. And then we have these major trends of artificial intelligence coming into play as well, right? And how do you think AI plays out in the world of cybersecurity today?
Oh, like any other part of technology, this is groundbreaking. So, AI or machine learning is a new way of coding and designing technology, where we can provide large data sets for a machine to learn from. Now, whether it's a machine learning to play chess, or whether it's a machine learning to write computer code, or a machine learning to continually look at the perimeter of a network or internet-facing assets of an organization, or whether it's a machine learning to continually probe a network from the outside and look for vulnerabilities. This is technology that can take over rapidly from what humans are doing, and if trained properly, if trained badly, it will do very, very poorly, but if trained properly, can do very well, and then can become technology that doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, 24/7 is probing a network or securing a network. So in cybersecurity, it's a big thing. On the defense side, there's many vendors already doing this, but look at technologies that understand what is normal in a network, what normal traffic looks like, what normal user behavior looks like, what normal data transfer looks like, and then rapidly point out anomalies and say this doesn't look right. This traffic coming from this nation doesn't look right, or this user acting in that way, looking for access to this resource, doesn't look right, and flagging alerts. And it could rapidly become the case in a defensive world, where it already is the case, where there's too many alerts for people to look at. So you can also have machines looking at and responding to alerts. Like the machines on the Harbour Bridge, maybe they can autonomously remediate issues as they arise, depending on the issue. But then likewise, we have the same on the attack side. And then we have vulnerabilities dropping every week, which could be new and different, that need to be absorbed. If we fast forward again, then we could have attacks happening, weaponization of vulnerabilities, which is already happening much, much faster every year. It doesn't take long now. It can be a matter of hours or a matter of days before a vulnerability is weaponized. So we could have attacks that happen very, very rapidly after vulnerabilities are publicly disclosed. And then we might need a machine that could very, very rapidly respond to attacks. So when this becomes a matter of milliseconds or seconds, we really need to cut the humans out. Again, lift the humans up and get them focused on where they should be. But as I began with this rant about artificial intelligence, part of this to make the technology effective is to train it appropriately. So part of the area where humans need to be involved is training these machines in how to do good work, not how to make things less secure. Because we could absolutely go backwards here as well and make things less secure as we go.
Yeah. So you touched a little bit on both the defensive and the attacking side, or how do they harness artificial intelligence is augmenting both attacks and defense. But we're also seeing this huge growth of fake news. It's not just attacks, right? I mean, it's taking over our life. There's fake news. People are changing the way elections are run, and we have revenge porn and all kind of things that's using this kind of technology, right? How do we even stand a chance to normalize this, right, against all this fake information that's out there? Do you think positive artificial intelligence on cyber will be able to rectify some of these issues as well?
Some. Look, I think we have absolutely fantastic growth in deepfakes and synthetic media. The videos that are coming out are entertaining, but again also horrifying in terms of what could happen. And if I think back a couple of years, I was thinking, well, we're going to see world leaders deepfaked and destabilization of international relations and tensions. We're going to see CEOs of large organizations faked, and you think about business email compromise now, where someone might change banking details on an invoice or somehow get a payment wired to them instead of where it should be. I saw all this sort of thing becoming the case. The CEO fraud, where the CEO emails you and says, I'm about to get on a plane, but I need all this money, transfer it now, I'm going to be offline, but get it done. That's where I thought this was going. But as you say, the technology is being used for pornography. It's being used for fake millionaires distributing get-rich-quick schemes, and humorous reasons. I've got two young daughters. They can download apps on their tablet that can help them create reasonably good deepfakes of them in a movie or my face, doing something bizarre. One of the strongest defenses, and I know the question's about how does good AI help us detect this, but one of the strongest defenses is in awareness. If it wasn't well publicized how this technology is growing, I think people would be much more likely to fall victim for it. But when children can produce reasonable deepfake videos of their family, it makes everybody much more skeptical when they're at work and they might get a video from their CEO or their manager telling them to do something that doesn't feel quite right. So I think that's a large defense here, the awareness of the problem and what's going on. There has been growing work done in the sense of AI detection of synthetic media or deepfakes, be it audio or visual, and it's good, it's interesting, but it's a bit of an arms race. The smarter the detection gets, the smarter the attackers will get. They will improve their deepfakes, and then they won't be detected. And then we'll invest money in detection, and we'll detect it again. I think a lot of this does come back to the human element of just think twice. When you get that request that doesn't feel right, or that video that doesn't feel right, if we see it, maybe we won't. Maybe it will stay in the realm of Tom Cruise playing golf, and I don't know, my head dancing on an elf's, I don't know. We will see.
Yeah. So Ben, what we are seeing is two major trends coming together. One is the weaponization of codes, and then augmented by the weaponizations of artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
So do you really see a future of good AI versus bad AI? That's the future of cybersecurity. What's your take on that?
Well, I think there's definitely a future of good AI versus bad AI, in the sense that AI will be assisting humans achieve their result. We probably will get to machine-on-machine interaction. To be honest, we're probably there with many use cases, but I think there will be this boundary where we're happy to let machines act autonomously, and there'll be a boundary where we say, no, we want a human at the end of that chain. So we'll have lots of collection of intelligence or metrics on the defensive side, and some things, as I said, we could have a machine respond autonomously and isolate a machine, clean it up, reboot it, whatever we need to do. But we could have many things where we're putting those metrics into a risk profile, adding them together to say this becomes a very large risk we want a human to look at. Likewise, on the bad side, there'll be things. I think on the criminal side, there'll be a lot more. I've used the phrase "fire and forget" before, where we can just have machines that 24/7 are firing out malicious code, malicious activity. But for the truly innovative attacks, I think we'll see humans involved. They need to be.
So Ben, looks like our work is cut out for us, man.
Absolutely.
So, I just want to understand from Okta perspective, how is Okta positioned themselves to secure corporations for the future of cybercrimes and cyber exploits?
Yeah, look, if I'll come back to my introduction where I said Okta is an identity provider, and that takes a few different. There's a few different ways to look at that. In a world that post-pandemic has moved remote, and we've got workers remote and consumers remote, that traditional perimeter we had around organizations has gone, and that this has been playing out in a number of years, like the transformation to cloud, but has been much accelerated. So without that perimeter, the logical point of control we have is identity. Who is logging on? It could be identity in device if device is a constant, but device isn't always a constant. So controlling that identity is really where Okta plays. If we think about securing these networks and organizations, be them private or public or be them corporates, we come back to this concept of zero trust architectures, which isn't a new concept, but again, in the post-pandemic world we're in, is becoming more and more important in terms of how we protect ourselves. And that zero trust framework really looks like understanding who is logging on, with what context we can add, where are they, when are they, is their behavior consistent, what resources are they requesting, building that risk profile I've alluded to, and then making a real-time decision, should this person who we've strongly authenticated get access to that resource at this time, from where they're sitting and for whatever they want to do. So for example, I could log on as a security professional, and we could provide context to be sure that I know, or that a network knows who I am, by giving me multiple factors. Now, we see this in the physical world again when you want to open a bank account, you might have to show a driver's license or a passport and a recent utility bill. A few different things that prove you are who you say you are. In the digital space, this plays out very similarly, where we want multiple factors. Individually, they're quite weak. We want something you know, that could be your username and password. Quite weak on its own. We want something you have. It could be a token on your mobile phone. Again, another factor proving you know, or proving you are who you are. And it could be something you are, like a biometric, a fingerprint, or a facial recognition. Individually, these can be spoofed, but actually stringing them together gives you much stronger authentication of who someone is. We should get to the point where we don't actually need passwords. Passwords themselves are not a strong control. If we can have someone simply logging on with their username, they're demonstrating it's something they know, and then adding a fingerprint or a YubiKey they stick in, or we have a service called Okta Verify, which is a push service on a mobile phone. Any of these strong modern methods to authenticate. We've got weaker ones like an SMS or security questions where you have to provide your mother's maiden name or something else. And any MFA really is better than none, but moving towards those strong MFA really gives us robust authentication of who a user is. Add that to what they want to access, we can then make that decision on that. So I come back to my example, I'm a security professional accessing a network, I authenticate in a strong way who I am. If I'm looking for security related collateral, that's absolutely fine, but if I get on and I'm looking for financial reports, maybe that raises a flag and says, no, actually this role, this person in this role doesn't get access to that material. Or maybe I'm logging on from a country on the other side of the world than where I'm based. And again, in an autonomous way, we can say that doesn't make a lot of sense. That behavior is not normal. Or maybe I always close my emails with cheers, comma, Ben, and an email comes from me to someone internally and it ends with, best regards or something which isn't normal behavior for me. That can again be picked up. They're small examples individually, but when you add them together to build a profile, you can very quickly bubble up an alert to a machine or to a human in an operations center and say, look at this behavior, we don't think this is accurate.
Wow, that is really, really a powerful weapon that we can use in our toolbox to give us a better peace of mind and up our security postures against unauthorized access, which is one of the main vectors of attack in today's cyber scene. So Okta, as the market leader in IAM, I think is well positioned to help our customers, enterprises to secure their environment through the use of identity management right in their environment. So Ben, before I let you go, I might have a last question for you. In these pandemic times, a lot of people are changing occupation. People are looking at how they want to look at their career moving forward, and a lot of people is very interested in cybersecurity. Some of these people are doing a mid-life or mid-career change. Is there some advice you can give all these professionals who are looking to reinvent themselves as cybersecurity professionals? What are some of the things that they need to look out for as they transit to this new career?
Yeah, let me begin by answering that by talking about why it's such a good career and why I love it, and then I'll talk about what I think is important to transition. But I'm someone who loves technology and really enjoys working with people. So I've made my career in that interface between people and tech, really helping people live better lives by enabling their use of technology. Now, I used to be a software developer. I've worked in technology strategy. I did a few different roles I've really enjoyed, but I didn't really love what I did till I joined cyber. And it was because I was doing everything I love in a fast-paced environment where I'm learning new things all the time, surrounded by like-minded people, and also get to really help people in a more tangible way. And I think often in technology we're doing intangible things, cutting code or building an application that you can't touch. Unlike an architect or a builder who can point down the street and say, "Here's what I did," and feel really good about that. In cyber, I get that positive feeling of helping people. And when I worked in-house in financial services, I had that positive feeling of helping our staff or our customers. When I moved to the vendor side, and I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the interview, working for Okta, I get to feel like I help our staff and our people, but also our customers and their customers. There's a real global reach in terms of uplifting. I've spent plenty of time talking about the bleak landscape we face. So we need people who are positive and can help us defend our people, our communities, our organisations, our governments. There's plenty of work to do. There's been lots of talk about skills shortage in cybersecurity. There's certainly not a career shortage. And then there's much debate around, well, do you need a strong technology background to go into cybersecurity, or do you not? And depending on who you talk to and what roles they're thinking about, you get very, very different answers. For me, I think it's about three things. I think it's about desire, so that real wanting to work in this space in technology and technology security. I think it's about curiosity, because technology moves very fast and cybersecurity moves even faster. We're seeing so much changing so quickly. Half of what I do is learning and keeping up with how the environment's changing. So I can think about how attackers are changing and organizational risk is changing, so we can think about how we defend. And the third thing for me is positivity. And this is for me when I hire or when I'm mentoring people. I think having a positive mindset is very, very important in any line of business. In fact, these three will probably all go for any line of business you want to work in. Having the desire, having the curiosity to learn, and then having the positive mindset, because we are going to get hit with big problems and we need to solve them. We can't sit back and say the sky is falling and give up or be discouraged. We need to be ambitious and excited about solving problems. If I come to the roles and the technical versus the non-technical, it's such a broad discipline. We have the very technical roles such as secure development, secure coding. We've got the blue and the red team traditionally, so the traditional defense team and the traditional attack team, the pen testers, and the red team who are attacking ourselves or attacking the supply chain with permission in a legal way to probe defences and make them better. And then this concept of a purple team who works in between, who really checks that what we're attacking is what we're defending, and all the alerts are working as they should. They're quite technical roles. Then we have much less technical ones. We've got risk roles, and I myself, after being quite technical, came through a risk and governance phase of my career to come into cyber. Much more about writing policy and understanding acceptable use, and where the lines are drawn, what's okay, what's not, and how we govern what we do and how we enforce our organisation and our supply chain to do things in the right way. And then there's all the peripheral roles like legal. Cybersecurity legal is a field in itself. The awareness training, I spoke about raising awareness of deepfakes, but raising awareness of business email compromise, of the social engineering we're all seeing, of keeping our employees who aren't as technical or aren't as security minded up to date with what's happening and what risks they should be aware of. And then outreach teams, people going out and spreading the good word, or talking to universities or talking to schools, trying to build that pipeline in engineering and mathematics and sciences to give us enough people to fill all the skills gaps we have. That's probably enough there.
Wow, so that's quite a bit, Ben. Thank you. So what you're saying is that, look, our job here is to make humanity in a better place, right? To secure humanity so that we can continue to optimize and digitize and do more work productively. And that's from a mission statement point of view. That's from a guidance point of view. But you look at the world of cybersecurity, there is no one fixed role. There's a huge number of roles that each does its part in ensuring that we live in a safer world in the cyberspace, right? So it all depends on your interests, and you can really look at which particular role you want to get into. And it's not necessary it's just hardcore cybersecurity skill sets that you need at the end of the day. You can evolve in any of the roles that we just mentioned earlier for people who are looking at a career for cybersecurity. Now, Ben, one last question, right? You talk about the future of cybersecurity, good AI versus bad AI. Would you advise our professionals who are in the cybersecurity field to pick up AI knowledge and AI skill set at this point of time to prepare themselves for the future?
Oh, I think it's in the toolbox that we need to be aware of. So if we're looking at learning, and in fact, if I was thinking about how people progress into cybersecurity, I think it's important, everything you've said, but also to understand your strengths and play to those, and then learn what you need around the outside, or understand where you want to get to in the industry, and then tailor that learning, because there's such a huge amount of learning available as well. But whichever way we look at it, I think machine learning and AI is going to be a large part of technology in the future, and the much wider information technology landscape, not just cybersecurity. So having an understanding of machine learning, how it works, how they're trained, how we can use them for defense, how they might be used against us, is all very important stuff. But there's just so much. I would just as often say people go study psychology and understand the mindset of an attacker to understand how we best defend. It's really a team sport, so we need people with skills across the board to come and help out.
Right, and thanks for your insight about this, Ben. Today is quite an intensive session that we have. There's a lot of topics that I've covered, and some of these things are really deep food for thought that I'll go back, I'll sleep on it for tonight and think about what you've just said, right? But all this information that we share is really, really critical for our leaders in enterprises and for our audience out there. And I really appreciate you taking the time to prep for this particular podcast and this video you have with us. And I'll look forward to invite you back in our future series of 3 to 4 week podcasts where we want to hear more about your expertise on the area of cyber security. So once again, on behalf of the audience, the leaders, and the Tony Tan Show and podcast, Ben, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to have you in our future sessions soon.
Yes, thank you, Tony. I feel like we're only scratching the surface. We could do many hours of this, but it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, this is just a start. Take care, Ben. I'll see you soon.
Bye.